Hello, everybody. Little bit of a jump forward there, more than I had planned to be, so I'll just drop that there. Hey, good to see you, everyone. Welcome to the Camden Haven Anglican Church Drill Down. It's excellent to be with you. I love and I look forward to tonight, week after week. So I hope you do too. It's great to be with you. Now, I need to grab my phone. Wait there. I'll be back in a sec. All right. Okay. So you may hear a little bit of music in the background. That's my daughter in the garage playing her music. So if that is the case, I hope you like the song. So what I need to do each week is just make sure I've got my phone on to this so I can see your comments, and I can always see Lois. Oh, Peter Barron. Peter, nice to have you with us. Very great. Hello, Peter. Graham and Jeanette, I suppose, and Linda and Lois and Gary there as well. It's great to be with you tonight. If you are watching live, then you can put comments in the live chat or questions. However, let me also encourage you to put a comment in the comment section, which is different to the live chat section. The comment section is down below the picture that you're seeing at the moment. So actually what I'll do is I'll show you that. So here we go. I'll just jump on the screen there. So here's our page, and as you're watching something, let's oh well, look at that. Let's watch last week's one. We'll put that up there. I'll put that off there. And so what you'll find underneath down here is a whole lot of place for comments. And you can put those comments in. Look at that. See Marge Cameron there? Let me enlarge that and get that across there. There you go. Look at that. Marge Cameron has made a comment, and Ellen has made a comment. And oh, yes, we know who this is. Over in, well, you know who you are, because we're going to talk about your question tonight. So I don't want to reveal too much. So. And there's, of course, Chack Kids and things like that. So, and that comment section is directly below the picture that you're looking at there. So, and the reason I want to draw your attention, excuse me, to that tonight, is because when you comment in that section, it triggers the YouTube algorithms, and they say, oh, okay, so people are talking about this, we want to promote this and let other people to hear about it. So a fascinating and easy way for you to help out and get the message out there is simply just to comment. So you can say anything. Like you can even say, that was hopeless, I hated it. And that would be a good comment, because you're totally free to do that. Anyway, so make sure that you're checking that out. We are at the moment doing a series in church called Controversial Christianity. The first week we looked at conspiracy theories, and that certainly triggered a whole lot of comments and people. We've had 600 or something views of that. And I think what that does is not so much say anything special about us, but say that the issue or the topic is quite relevant. People want to know. They want to know about these things. Where are things at? And so it was great to be able to talk about that. Hello to Simon Apostle. He's there too. Good to see you, Simon. We're continuing our series on controversial Christianity. We've looked at conspiracy theories a couple of weeks ago, and then last week we looked at the end times. Is it the end times? This week we're thinking about government and the Christian response to government. And as I said before, if you didn't see the talk on Sunday, then by all means check it out. Only goes for like 19 minutes and 30 seconds. No time at all. You can check it out again. Love to know what you think. Always trying hard to make what we do helpful for you. And growing and challenging, that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about government, and it's good to see Alan and Cheryl as well here too. Good to see you guys. We're going to talk about particular Christian attitude to government, and some people are lovers and some people are haters of the government. But where are Christians in all of that? So some Christians can be really highly politically motivated, and others can be maybe a bit lax or even a bit lazy. And I think we both need to learn something as we think about what a Christian response is to the government. And I want to say that it is quite a unique response to the government, and it's not so much putting all our trust in the political process. At the same time, it is recognizing that God has structured things in such a way on the planet and using humans that we do see that there are political ways of changing things. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later as we get into some of those things. But a quick review of Sunday is that we saw three things, three S words in our relationship with a state. And the first word was supplication, and that was just thinking through prayer. And I think what we need to really remember is, let me actually just open that up for you. Let's go to 2 Timothy, because we want to see what's going on here. So I know I've told you I don't really like the headings because they don't really always help, but sometimes they give you some direction. Here's some instructions on worship, and here's what the Apostle Paul is saying should happen when God's people meet together. So it's not saying that you can't do it by yourself or whatever, but it's particularly saying when you get together. And look at this. I urge first of all then that petitions or supplication, prayers, intercession and thanksgiving be made for all people. And here we go. For kings and those in authority. So for kings and those in authority. So particularly pray for those. And what's the reason? Well, the reason is that we may live peaceable and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. So the goal of the prayer to God regarding the government is that there will be peacefulness in the community, that sort of thing. So we're praying, Lord, help them, give them wisdom so to run the country in a way that promotes peace and harmony, that sort of thing. But there is more of a reason, isn't there? It's not just that we may live peaceable and quiet lives. It says there, this is good. So God is saying that is good, and it pleases God our Saviour. And what is it? Who wants all people to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. So one of the things to see there, it's not just saying that God happens to want people to be saved, but there is a connection there between praying for the government, asking for periods of peace, and the church growing in the gospel, and people getting saved. And so often we hear that it's persecution is what a lazy church needs to wake up, and I suppose that's true, isn't it? That is the case. But the Apostle Paul here is really saying that what is ideal, the ideal conditions for people to be saved is times of peace and quiet. So keep that in mind as when you pray for the government. And I think one of the things we've got to see as we step back and see the tremendous shift that has taken place in ruling governments over the last 2,000 years. And so one of the things that I've been really struck by, even as we've been thinking about this the last week or couple of weeks, is, well, think about this. From Nero to ScoMo. Think of the change that's happened from Nero to ScoMo. Now there is Nero way back there in 1st century Rome and the provinces of Rome and the places where Rome was in control. Part of that was Israel and parts of Turkey. So think of the average person's experience of the local government you know what I mean by that, the local government and wider, compared to what it is today. So in the past then, Nero didn't care really if you were sick. Nero didn't care if you started some sort of organisation to look after the poor. He just cared if you caused any problems, then he'd come down with the sword, take you out. ScoMo, on the other hand, now when I say ScoMo, I'm just saying because it rhymes with Nero. I'm not promoting ScoMo in particular. What we've got today is a government that is profoundly impacted by Christianity and is thinking about how to care for the people. So the government primarily is concerned for the governed and not for the governors, that sort of thing. So they're not ruling for the benefit of the rulers, but for the benefit of the ruled. And that's a really important shift that we need to see that's happened across the world, and particularly in countries that have been impacted by Christianity. And really, it's just, Janet's here. G'day, Janet. Nice to see you. Now, simply, it's just demonstrably true that government has been profoundly shifted and changed by Christianity. You can just draw a straight line from the Bible and Jesus to governments caring and being changed today. It's so true. Isn't it funny? I'm saying, I'm not into Christianity. I don't want any of that. And yet they're living in a world that they say is right and good. And the reason it's right and good is because of Christianity. Sometimes we just don't know the wallpaper, do we? With the wallpaper's the normal thing around us. It's always been there. But in fact, it's profoundly impacting. So praying for authorities, a key attitude of Christians, as we sum up last Sunday. And just notice as we look at that particular passage, it does there say instructions for worship, doesn't it? It talks about what should happen in church. We've got a little bit later praying and that sort of thing, men praying and etc. Now, I suppose what I want to point out there is that this is part of worship. Praying for government is part of worship. It's part of recognising that God is good, and that this good God rules through people, and that we want to pray for the government. So there's part of the idea of worship. The second S, remember the second S was submission, and that was looking at Romans. Here we go, from Romans chapter 13, and I think the normal posture of the Christian to government is a posture of submission. So we submit rather than rebel. Now a YouTube clip was pointed out to me that talked about Romans 13, and it was helpful. It was very good. I'll probably put a link to it or somewhere so you can check it out. And it was looking at Romans 13, and it was saying, though, that Romans 13 isn't saying submit to the authorities, and that's not the only Christian posture towards authorities. And that is true, but what that successfully did, that video, in trying to be a bit edgy and give a bit of an alternative position on Romans 13, it actually took away the very edge of Romans 13, and the edge of Romans 13 that hits us is that we are to submit. That is a radical response and position to take as Christians, is to submit to the governing authorities. And the reason that we submit to the governing authorities, as it says there, here we go, there is no authority except that which God has established. And we're going to come back because there's a really good question that's come up for us in that. So when we think about what the limits of the government are, this is a good question, a good discussion for us to say, how far should the government impact on my life, on my personal life, my personal decisions? I think we're facing one of those issues at the moment with this whole vaccine. So the government isn't telling us that the vaccine is mandated. It's not mandated, not yet anyway. And yet it is creating the circumstances and situation where people feel they need to be to live life in the short term anyway, until December. So it's only a short term sort of thing. But there will probably be long-term disadvantages for people who decide not to be vaxxed. Now, that's not saying, therefore, that the government is mandating vaccination. It's not. You have the choice to put into your body whatever you decide. But they're just having to make a decision for the greater good, and that's the sort of thing that they're doing. And that's the point here. What it says here in verse 2, consequently those who rebel against the authority is rebelling against God. Where is it that I was looking for? Here we go. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. So the limits, the jurisdiction, you could even say, of the government's authority is there, your good. Your good is it. So it does make us have to think about a bunch of stuff, because a government can play a very significant part in yours and my personal life. If I begin to harm myself, if I begin to not eat or whatever, I have a sort of a right, yes, to do that. But the government can actually take over and say, well, no, we're going to put you in hospital because you're obviously not making decisions very well for yourself. And where a family might not be able to look after you or something like that, the government will take, and that's actually thinking for your good. They will cause you to be fed and all those sorts of things. So I think that question of the jurisdiction of the government, what it's there for, I think is caught up in the word good and the word servant. And both those words were there, weren't they? So you can see the word servant, let's make that red, and the word good, let's make that red. That makes it highlight, makes it stand out. So those are the things. It's a servant to do you good. So you could say, yes, chastisement, because with the sword, but also care. And so the government does not only have a sword, but it has a hospital bed and that sort of thing, things to care for us. I just want to say that, again, just think of the impact of Christianity upon the government that we experience both in Australia and in England and in the United States and in plenty of places where Christianity has profoundly impacted the whole thing. That we have governments that care about our health. We have governments that put TV ads up, spend their money to make sure we're okay and whatever it might do to stop smoking and to help with stop smoking. They put on rules and regulations regarding taxation and regulations of business and safety in cars, all that sort of stuff. We've really got to see the very significant shift in government involvement in believers' life, in the life of humanity. And I think that is worth taking very good note of. I do want to pick up one thing. Often people will put down the church because of it has a degree of tax exemption. That doesn't mean I don't pay tax. I pay tax just as much as you pay tax. But a church, when it buys something, purchases something for the purposes of its for that which it's purposed, it will it'll be able to claim back GST and things like that. And that is because the government sees community groups, of which a church is one, actually adding value to the community. So there's more value to the community in a church there than the 10% tax that they would have got. So it's like, yeah, we'll give you 10%, but we know we're getting 20% back, that sort of thing. Now my dog, that's all right. She's okay. She's gone back to sleep. She was banging on the door, but she stops now. So, but the other thing to note there, isn't that fascinating that we see that that the government is actually called God's servant, and you saw there that I highlighted it there. And it was said at another point, where was that? God's servants, there it is. Let me highlight that one. And here is another one in verse 6. Let's see. Can you see that one okay? Oops, I didn't put that on. That's what I've got to do. Sorry, I didn't have the right screen on. We can see there that we've got God's servant, God's servants, and the authorities are God's servants. So first of all, what we want to pick out here is these two words. The first two servants, they are just the word deacon, which is a sort of a church word, a leader within the church and that sort of thing. And the third word there of servants, the third time, is actually a different word to deacon. It's the word that we sort of get liturgos or liturgy from, that sort of thing. And this is the people workers, the priests. And so it's fascinating, isn't it? In some sense, God, or Paul here, sees the government as priests, God's priests for our good. That's a fascinatingly different way to look at the governing authorities that we have, whether they're police officers or local parliamentarians or ScoMo himself, that sort of thing. I do want to point out, because one of the things that we didn't really get to on Sunday and that I think is important is this word here in verse 5. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but as a matter of conscience. A matter of conscience. I wonder if we make that yellow. That'd be all right. Oh, it's not going yellow. Okay, it doesn't want to go yellow. Oh, that's because I've got to do that and then that. There we go. Now, I think one of the things to see as we're thinking about this is that Paul's point has been, do the right thing, because you don't want to be hit with the government sword, which is God's agent or God's servant, and he's bringing you back into line, but also because of conscience. And although it's just this little comment there, it's a very significant one. And if you were to scan through the instances of the idea of conscience in the New Testament, you would see that it's a very significant thing. First and foremost, Hebrews chapter 10 will talk about our consciences being cleansed, and our hearts being sprinkled with the blood of Jesus. That is, we've been forgiven, got a new heart, and having a new heart, we have a new mind, new conscience. And it's not only that we want to resist having a guilty conscience, that's not only what we want to do, although that is the case. So when we break the law, we have a guilty conscience, and we want to find forgiveness of that, submit to whatever punishment there will be. But also we want to have a clear conscience and a good conscience. And Paul will often talk about how he has a clear conscience. And because a clear conscience is one that is working in line with the Word of God, that is recognizing not only the authority that that God has given to those who are governing us, but also that we are living in line with God's Word. So as we learn more of God's Word, it works on our conscience, and our conscience is renewed and revived, and we want to live for Him. So in that sense, conscience is a way of guiding our worship, that sort of thing. I will come back to that because we want to think through that. So it's more, we obey the law not because of merely the prospect of punishment, but we obey the law because of love. So if your kids, for example, they said, well, they only did what they were told because they were scared or they feared you or feared punishment, you would be saying, yeah, that's not really how it works. I want you to love me. I want you to know that I love you. But here is this healthy balance of, yes, concern, obeying the law because of fear of punishment, but also obeying the law because of conscience and wanting to do the right thing. So that final thing that I had on Sunday was, the first one was supplication, the second one was submission, and the third one was skepticism. And yes, submission is the normal posture of the Christian towards governing authorities, but it is not the only posture that Christians have ever taken. And so we talked very quickly about the midwives in Exodus chapter 1 and how they misled the Pharaoh, who was their authority, and God blessed them for it, and Rahab and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego and Daniel, when he was told not to pray, and he did, and Peter and John, when they were told to stop speaking in the name of the Lord Jesus, and they said, well, God's told us one thing and you've told us one thing. Who do you think we should listen to? Probably God. And that sort of thing. Resistance is sometimes obedience. I'll tell you a story. I haven't seen them for a long time, so I had a very good with Brother Andrew, and this particular friend had smuggled Bibles into China. And on one occasion, he had a whole car boot load full of Bibles to take into China. And he saw that he was going to be stopped at a checkpoint, and he thought, my goodness me, what's going to happen here? So he's praying, Lord, just give me the words to say. I don't know what to do. The authorities there certainly going to do it. They got to his car. They said, Sir, open the boot. He said, oh dear, this is going to get me. He thought he just had a boot full of Bibles, hundreds of small Bibles. And so he lifts up the boot and they look in. Now, you want me to say they couldn't see anything, but no, they saw Bibles. And they said, wait, what's going on here? Why have you got all these Bibles? These are illegal to take in. You're going to be in trouble. He responded with these words. He said, I've been speaking to the highest authority possible, and they said I can bring these Bibles in. Well, the police officers, the army guard there, immediately said, oh, okay. And they let him shut the boot, get in his car, drive into China. Now, this was when there was no chance of getting a Bible in China. And there is my friend who, he sort of misled them, didn't he? But he sort of didn't. He had been praying and speaking to the highest authority possible. The Chinese there had a very high respect for authority, and so who knows? God worked amazingly there. So there is that sort of skepticism, that sort of sometimes we need to recognize that a government's policy is against what God might be saying, and so we want to resist that, so that normal posture is not always obedience to the authorities, but is always obedience to God. And so, that's some interesting stuff that was going on there. I was going to say something else, but I totally can't remember what that was. We at the moment need to be a little suspicious or skeptical. In New South Wales, in Australia, New South Wales, there is a bill going through at the moment about voluntary assisted dying in New South Wales. And it's euthanasia, that sort of thing. Slightly different. Now, I'm still to read all the details of it, but you and I, as Christians, we need to feel that we're able to have some say on these sorts of things, and I think we ought to take some say because we believe that God has given authority to government, to people in government, and that He has called us to work in with them, and He has created a way of us to be able to protest by petition, not only petition to God, but petitioning. And for those that are at church, you will receive a email hopefully tomorrow, definitely by Friday, where you will have a link where you're able to fill out a survey about what you think of voluntary assisted dying, and there's a bunch of details there, and you'll be able to have your say as a Christian. I'm not telling you what to say, but I encourage you to really think carefully through what's going on there. I think it's actually quite complex. I don't want you just to think, it's all wrong straight away and just wipe it out. We need to think carefully. What is the bill? How we think it through? What changes might we suggest? If we want to suggest any changes at all, that sort of thing. Okay, so when it comes to that voluntary assisted dying, I know Linda had a comment about that. And so at the moment, I think that's our best work, is to be able to grab that link, have our say, pray, and go from there. But there were a few questions, and I want to talk about those questions now. Those 3 points that I mentioned that come from a Christian's attitude to the government: supplication, submission, and skepticism. One of the questions I thought was excellent was this: could you have two Christians who agree on the first 2 points, that yes, they should pray and yes, they should submit, but disagree on the third point in the skepticism? That is, one Christian feels that the government is doing the wrong thing, and one Christian feels that the government is doing the right thing. And therefore, in our particular case, when it comes to the vaccines, one will say, I think this is wrong and won't do it. Another Christian, I think this is right and will do it. And we've got to recognize that most people I know aren't silly. They're not just swallowing what they're hearing. They're actually reading about things, and I know I've certainly been asked lots of questions about it, and to think through lots of those sorts of matters. Both those two Christians could actually be motivated by love. We don't want to say, well, only the Christian who is for the vaccine is actually loving because they're concerned about their neighbour. No, the one who is against the vaccine also might have the motivation of love and for their neighbour. In the sense that they might see that the restrictions placed on those who don't get the double vaccine actually creates a situation where a neighbour is not able to work or that sort of thing. Well, we agree. There is a decision made about the care for others. Now, when it comes to these things, two people could disagree. They can't both be right. But in God's eyes, they could be both making the right decisions because they're acting out of conscience and love. But when it comes to the details, they can't both be right. They could both be wrong, but when it comes to those details, they can't both be right. One can't say the vaccine is a bad thing, and the other say the vaccine is a good thing, and both be right. I hope you can see that. So that's what I mean. There's that encouragement to actually keep patience with each other because people have thought things through, and we want to treat them as human beings with humility, and we want to have the goal of peace with each other. So I would say I think it's very important for us to see that because that's what we're experiencing at the moment, even in our own church. Not to a tremendous degree, but significant, and only if one person is thinking it matters to me. I think that we need to, if you were just to if we just to look at the next part of Romans, you've got Romans chapter 12, which is about worshipping, then Romans chapter 13, which is about submission to authorities, and then in chapter 14, you've got this bit about the weak and the strong, and what that's going on about is when two Christians disagree on something, a disputable matter, and a disputable matter, and when they disagree on that, it's how do you work out how you're going to respond there? And it's interesting that what Paul says that in Roman in this period that there was one person who was right and one person who was wrong. It was this issue of whether you can eat meat sacrificed to idols or you can eat only vegetables. And Paul says, well, the person who says you can eat meat sacrificed to idols, that person's right because an idol is nothing. But for the sake of the brother or sister whose conscience is not clear over this, you should decide not to act according to your own freedom, but be free to serve the other person. And just take some patience there and just eat vegetables with them, that sort of thing. And I suppose that is a word for both people on both sides of the vaccine debate, to be patient with one another. And that is a hard gig. That is not easy, but with God's help we can do it. Second question was this. It is about governing authorities. This is a good one, I think. And it is this. I don't think there's a problem with me saying this, but I understand in Malaysia that the government has made it illegal to preach the gospel to Muslims. And asking the question, what is the wise and godly thing to do in this situation for Christians who have a concern for their Muslim friends regarding their eternal destiny? Well, there's a number of things to think through here, and I don't think it is always straightforward, and the one answer is not going to be good for everybody, but let me give you some thoughts anyway. I want to ask, first of all, it was very helpful today at Bible study, we talked about this question, and one of the things was to ask, first of all, what is the motive of the government for making this decision? And that's something I can't guess or explore. I don't have the resources for that. I haven't taken the opportunity really to check out the details in the legislation in Malaysia. But I asked the question, why is this the case? Is this because it's a Muslim majority? Is this because they're trying to protect their own? Whatever it might be. At least that's a good question to ask and think that through. Now, I think that the question is right in that it's asking for wisdom, and defiance might be necessary in the case that if you have the opportunity to share the gospel with someone and you say, well, no, the government's telling me I'm not allowed to, I would want to say, before you go one way or the other, just ask yourself, what are the options open to us, and what is a way of dealing with this in a way of wisdom. Is it, I don't know the answer to this question, but it may be illegal to try to convert someone. Is it illegal to convert? I know that in some Muslim countries, yes, it is illegal to convert, and you're not allowed to do it. And if you do it, you're going to get in big trouble, and your family even dob you in, that sort of thing. So I'm not sure what the story is in Malaysia, but I would say that you would need to pray for wisdom, because what is defiance to the government going to look like in that situation? Is it going to look like you going out on the street and start preaching the gospel to every Muslim you see? That's probably not going to work, and I don't think God would want that necessarily to happen anyway. I think rather he is mostly into the very slow and steady and relational, getting together with somebody, getting them to know you and you them, understanding where each other are at, and beginning to introduce Jesus into the picture as they see your life and your words and your doctrine, and they begin to be persuaded towards your position of in matters of spirituality and Christianity in particular. So I suppose the way that I want to answer this question is to say we need wisdom in answering this question, and ask the question, what is the motive of the government? Why have they made this rule? And just to be thinking through, how is it that we actually do evangelize people anyway? And if you're able, I mean, Peter will say that you're able to win, the believing wife can win her husband without a word, which is a fascinating a comment to be made there by Peter, without a word. So you who are struggling with that, is it possible that you could win over a Muslim brother or sister without a word? Now, eventually there's going to need words, obviously, but those words are going to be coming out of a question from your friend, rather than being applied forcefully or something like that. I think that's a tricky one and needs to be thought through. Jesus talks to the disciples in their evangelism and tells them what to be: innocent as doves, but shrewd as serpents. Innocent as doves, but shrewd as serpents. And that's what I'm trying to do in the answer to that question. Not just taking a simplistic way and saying, yeah, well, just get out there and preach the gospel and take the consequences. That may be the case for you in some situations, but I just want to broaden it out and say, how can you be as shrewd as a serpent? And ask the question, how can I infiltrate the life of a Muslim brother or sister gently and carefully, with all their permission, not tricking them or that sort of thing, entrapment, but genuinely caring for them. I think that's a great one. There is a third question, and it's great. I've got time to answer it. It's this question: what about Hitler? Hitler question always comes up, doesn't it? If God is the one who gives authority and places people in authority, remember Daniel chapter 2, it is God who places people in authority, then what about Hitler? Did God put Hitler in? And while we're there, why not talk about even worse people like Mao Zedong, who in China oversaw the murder of 20 million of his own people, and Stalin, who is said to have done like 45 million, some incredibly, it leaves Hitler in the dust, really, to put it crudely and not offensively, I hope. Did God put those people in charge, and why would God put them in charge? Here is the thing. God is not a cosmic control freak. He's not like playing a big game of chess and moving the pawns and the kings and the queens and all that sort of stuff. There is a sense where the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord and he guides it wherever he wants. But he also involves people, humanity, in the leadership of his creation. right from the beginning of Genesis, God gave to humanity tasks of governing the world before them. And so Adam and Eve were given the task of tilling the land and making it fruitful and making the garden bigger than what it was, and spreading to the whole of the world. And so there is this idea that God shares his work of governing with people. Now the question then, you say, well, why did he choose those bad people like Stalin and Hitler and Mao Zedong? First of all, the question is, where's he going to find a good person? He hasn't got much options. See, is it that Hitler or something was just born that way and then he was always going to do that? Or was it that he received power and then, having absolute power, was absolutely corrupt, became absolutely corrupt? Would you do differently if you were in the situation? Now you're able to say, yes, of course you would do differently because you've got hindsight and you're not put in that opportunity. But if you were given the power that people like Stalin and Mao Zedong and if you were put in power by the people that much, how do you know you wouldn't do something similar? I think Hitler, for example, had very sound reasoning for his decisions. When I say sound, I mean sound in his own mind, not right or moral or anything like that. Don't want to get that wrong. But so the question is, how could God put someone like that in charge? Well, actually, they were put in charge by the process that God ordained and wants to happen. People voted them in, or they grew in the ranks, that sort of stuff. They took on more and more responsibility. So think of Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Originally, when he first came into power, my understanding is that it was excellent. People were celebrating, he was bringing the economy back online, fantastic. He was loved and yay, promoted, woohoo, it was fantastic. But then power's gone to his head, and then he does all the terrible things that he did. See, God is involved. He's not intervening. I think that might just sound like semantics, but I'm trying to get a point across here that God is intimately involved in our world and in our daily lives, but at the same time he's given us humanity. He's always planned to rule through humanity, rule on the planet through humanity. That was always his plan, and I think will probably continue into the new creation, though that's something to think about and talk through. I think what is important to say, though, is that the authority that these people have taken on, and then they begin to abuse that authority, they will be called to account for that. For those who have been given much, much will be expected of them. So someone like Hitler, yes, there will be a judgment day for him. But how has God judged Hitler? Well, first of all, he has judged Hitler in the other nations of the world, the governments of the other nations coming together and saying, this is not okay what you're doing. And so he has punished Hitler with the sword or the fighter jet or whatever it might be. But we think, what if he just escaped it and blew himself up in a bunker, whatever it might be. The fact is that he will still be called to account on the day of judgment. And the fact is that every single person will be called to account on the day of judgment. There is God has set a day when he will judge the world by the man he has appointed, Jesus Christ, and he has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. So what about Hitler? Well, it's the way God has chosen to deal with. He's happy to have humanity leading. He's not always happy with the outcome of humanity's leading, but often he is. We always need wisdom. So at the top of this live stream tonight, I said this is about how to vote, and I suppose we vote prayerfully, planning to submit, and ready to resist if necessary. And so we will vote to the best of our ability. We may actually vote someone in who turns out to be not doing what we thought they would do, which seems to be for some of you what is happening here with our local parliamentarian, who is leaning towards affirming the Voluntary Assisted Dying Bill. You get to have a say in that, so I encourage you to do that. We have a great privilege of being under the government that we are, but we have a great responsibility of having a say in this government. In some sense, it is the church is the conscience of the community and the government, and so we ought to be speaking up for what is right and true, and for those that are vulnerable, are less fortunate, that sort of thing. Well, guess what? I've only gone 4 minutes over tonight. I don't have any questions in particular, I don't think, unless you've put questions in the chat at the bottom. So what I'm going to do just before I say farewell is I'm going to check that, and the way that I'm going to check that, I can't check that on my phone because the app doesn't look at the comments very well, but I do want to check that is happening. Oh, now I'm talking. Okay, that's okay. There's no comments there. That's all right. So I just wanted to check that before we went on, but I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. This is the drill down. Oh, by the way, I've got this new thing now, because if I tell a joke, I can do this. I don't know if you heard that, but you're meant to hear that. Actually, yes, you would have heard that because it's on too. Or if I say something that's bad, boo, you say boo as well. So unfortunately, I'm going to be manipulating those things, and when I tell a joke, I'll be able to go, yay, it's very funny, someone's laughing. It'll make me feel good. Anyway, it's great to be with you, everybody. Always good to see you. I'm going to say farewell and see you next week.